So there's a misconception that if you're single, you are incomplete, perhaps damaged, salvaged, and you won't be happy until you find your one. And that is not true. That is bullshit. It is a message that has been fed to us by media and advertising. The truth is, when you're single, you have the richest soil for growth. That's why I created this podcast. And unlike other podcasts, this one is host-driven, not guest-driven. That means I will be rotating health and wellness experts 3 times a week to give you the giant box of wellness crayons, not just the primary colors, so you can start building a meaningful life. It's time to give singlehood a cape.
Hi, I'm Breanna Foster. I'm here with Sofia Romani. Am I saying that right? Okay. Fellow badass single mother. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a chance to introduce yourself, Sofia.
I'm Sofia Romani. I'm a single, queer, non-binary, moderately disabled mom. I am 32. I live in Minneapolis. It's horribly cold outside right now. I own a business. I'm a healer. I wear a lot of hats. That's who I am. Yeah.
Amazing. Love that. So single mom, which I actually, the way that we met was through Instagram. I remember being pregnant and being like, I don't know anyone who's pregnant or a mom or a single mom. And I literally just typed, I think, hashtag single mom or like hot mom or something. And your profile came up and I was like, oh my God, she's a badass and she's a single mom. Like, oh my gosh, goals. And that's how we met through Instagram, like a couple years ago. I think we were both pregnant at the time.
Yeah, we were pregnant at the same time. So when I first got pregnant, when I decided to follow through with my pregnancy, I was single. And I was like, okay, if I do this, I'm going to have a single pregnancy. And like, who of our generation doesn't go to Instagram and instantly search and look for examples of that thing that you're trying to do? And what I saw was just like literally 2 people. It was literally 2. And I was just like, we can't be the only 3 out there. And I was just like, okay, so I'm going to do this. And I'm really like empowered by that. But there needs to be like, I don't know, some kind of like network of us. So I just started posting about my journey and being a single pregnant person. And the amount of people that reached out to me and still continue today has been like kind of crazy and overwhelming. But I just think that because there's such a stigma about being a single parent, being a single mother, being a parent or a mother at all, but then also being single and pregnant, it's just like, what are you doing? It's a total like rebellious act against, I'll say it, the patriarchy.
Oh my God.
And people are uncomfortable with that. I've lost friends because of it. I've gained friends because of it. I lost a job because of it, which I can't say too much about. But, you know, there's just like any number of things that get tied into people having a problem with you doing something outside of like the status quo. And I think single motherhood and being a single pregnant person in this world can be at the very forefront of that a lot of times.
No, absolutely. And it's crazy hearing the similarities in our stories because I have a feeling with just the sheer amount of people that have reached out to you. And I've been a little bit more private. I haven't shared my story as much online, but I have a sneaking suspicion that there's so many people out there with similar experiences. Like I also lost a job being a single pregnant person. I also had a hard time finding people in similar situations. Like your page was, like you said, like there was 3 when I looked now instead of 4, you know, like, or 2. And so, it's crazy to think that there's so many people going through this, but because of the stigma or because of maybe like in my situation wanting to remain private, like some of these things aren't shared. So it's so important to have people like yourself who are actually sharing their story for people to relate, because you're all the way, I mean, we never would have met otherwise. You're all the way over in Minneapolis. I'm in LA. And just like seeing your story was like inspiring. And I was also single when I decided to go through with the pregnancy. And it's so important to see other people doing it just to know that it's possible.
That it's possible and that there's nothing wrong with it and that we shouldn't be punished for it. You know what I mean? Our society is structured so that you don't get rewarded for producing the next generation of people unless you check these certain boxes: heteronormative, with a man, you know, in a marriage, blah 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 blah, have a house. And of course, like, some of the longer you go down the list, some of those things become a little more interchangeable, especially as time progresses. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that you know, quintessential American nuclear family is like more the rarity these days, and probably has been for a long time. I remember finding out I was pregnant at a Planned Parenthood because I was actually going in to get an IUD, which is insane.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like sitting there and they're asking me the questions and they were like, have you ever wanted to be a parent? And I'm like, oh, I definitely do, but not right now. And they were like, why? And I was like, because I don't have a partner. And the nurse said the most perfect thing. She just said, there are many ways to be a parent. And that blew my mind. And it's exactly what I needed to hear before she figured out I was pregnant and had to come back and tell me that there's not going to be an IUD today.
Oh my gosh. She didn't even know you were pregnant yet.
No, we were just going through the preliminary questionnaire. Yeah.
Oh my, that is amazing.
That like stuck with me so hard. Like, the sentiment of there are many ways to be a parent is so true, even if you do fit into that, like, that typical nuclear family, like I mentioned. But for those of us, most of us that do not, it's just something that I hope everyone realizes and understands. There's no perfect way. And that is something you get challenged with daily as a parent. You're gonna mess up. You cannot be a perfect parent. It's not what children need, for one, and it's completely unobtainable. So, yeah, kind of lost my train of thought sometimes.
No, you're fine. But like, tell me why the Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood has saved my life a million times. You know, tell me why the nurses there are just straight up angels. They just, for some reason, are a different breed of nurse. I shout out Planned Parenthood. Like,
Really,
love
Planned
y'all.
Parenthood, thank you. Because, okay, here's the thing. It's because of Planned Parenthood I felt empowered to become a parent as a single person. It's because of them. And I love telling that story. Like, they're the reason why I did this. And I mean, there's obviously other reasons, but like, to have that as my foundation of like, okay, we support you. You're going to go home now and you're going to take all this information. These are all of the options. You are capable of any of it. It just has to do with what you want. And there's obviously other factors that you have to consider and weigh against themselves and whatever. But at the end of the day, like, your heart knows. And I think that, at risk of sounding really cliche, you have to follow your heart. You know, you just do. And there's certain things you can do to bolster yourself and like set yourself up in the right direction. Simultaneously, you're up against a lot.
Absolutely. I love that too. You brought up a good point that like Planned Parenthood specifically is there no matter what. And I'm turning this into an ad for Planned Parenthood now, but like literally Planned Parenthood was there for me through my pregnancy as well, and also 2 abortions. And their non-judgmental like support is so important, because specifically I've been to other hospitals when I had my second abortion, and I know this is a controversial topic, but I did the medical, like the pill, and I was warned that it would be like really painful, but I wasn't sure if I was dying or not throughout it, you know? So I went to a hospital. I actually took myself to the ER because I was like, this doesn't feel right. But in the end, it was. This is really painful. And yeah, but like the hospital that I went to was affiliated with a certain religion, and they shooed me away basically, and were like, well, you shouldn't have had an abortion. And I was like, okay, literally called Planned Parenthood right away.
They denied you the necessary medical
They denied me care. And it's so crazy because it's like I was raised really religious. And so I get it, but like, what the hell? You know, it's still
You
crazy to
you get
see.
it. Sorry.
Oh, that just
No,
like really bothers me so much.
dude, it's wild. And it's like, I mean, I have a whole bone to pick with religious trauma, you know, but like, okay, what about your childhood? Were you raised religious?
I was raised Catholic. I'm Italian. My stepfather's Mexican. That's who raised me. So I lived in a blended, multiracial, multi-belief system, we'll call it, because no one was ever really on the same page with religion. But super, super patriarchal, super machismo, super misogynistic, super like you're the problem, you little whore, whatever.
Oh man, yeah.
It was a violent place to grow up in for in many different aspects. Um, Especially being like a little queer kid, just like having no concept of what I was or who I was because I was supposed to believe that what they were telling me I was true, and none of that was healthy. So my childhood was really rough. I actually had a lot of trauma growing up. Um, and I think that has informed my abilities to parent far beyond that of most, to be honest. Um, it has, my upbringing has informed my parenting, like, I think more than a lot of folks out there. I think coming out of adversity is going to benefit anybody. But when you're applying that to raising a child with like intention and love and care, compassion, like those being your pillars, you start to be able to process that trauma in a whole new way. So there's a lot of cycle breaking going on in our household, and there's a lot of just intentionality and like really being able to hold space for everyone's feelings and being human, like not trying to be zenned out all the time because that's not realistic. Like I'm an Italian raised in a Mexican household. We have big feelings, okay? we say lots of loud things. So yeah, I just in a way like I'm grateful that I have that experience of life to kind of push me forward into being a really good parent to my son.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on it before. I mean, our kids don't need us to be perfect. You know, it also wouldn't be attainable. They look up to us and they're gonna do what we do, you know. And if we're perfect, that would be a crazy unattainable goal for them anyways. And they really just need us. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's been one of the hardest things for me too because I feel like when you're on your own self-growth journey, you become like hyper aware of like your childhood trauma and like the way it affected you, and then as a parent, you're like aware of how it's affecting your kid. And so it can be really triggering. Like parenting, I didn't expect it to be so triggering, you know, but I'm like, oh my God, this could potentially traumatize him this way. But I think just even acknowledging that as parents and like holding space to like apologize to your kid is something that, you know, a lot of us never even got. You know, we're gonna blow up, we're gonna have like moments that we wish we could have done better, but just like apologizing for that. Literally, like the other day, I've been in the process of trying to get a passport for my son, which getting a passport for a minor while co-parenting with a difficult ex is so impossible. There's just a million hoops to jump through. Don't recommend it on my worst enemy. But I was I was at the post office for like the fourth time, like my fourth passport appointment, right? Trying to get all my paperwork together. And they were like, oh, this notarized permission has expired. And
It's always
it's
the notarized thing, isn't it?
Oh my God, yes. And I was just like, oh my God, the hoops I had to jump through to get through this. And, you know, my 2 year old is being two. He's running around screaming at the post office. And I'm just like, oh my God. And I like picked him up and I was just like, stop screaming, you know? And like, he just looked at me like, I didn't even yell, but I just had a stern tone that he wasn't used to with me. And he just looked at me like I just shattered his whole world. And I was just like, oh my God, I immediately felt so guilty. And he was just quiet the rest of the time, but just like teary eyed looking at me like this person I love the most just was mean to me, you know? And I was like, oh my God. So I had to just like go out to the car and like put my head on the steering wheel and take like 5 deep breaths and then turn around and apologize to him. And it's so, so, so humbling. But I feel like even though I felt horrible, I was thinking about it after and I was like, I don't know that I ever got a moment like that from, say, like my dad who would have these explosive things. Like I never got a moment from him to be like, I'm sorry, I'll do better.
Totally. And I think that's what makes being self-aware of those things and still going through the motion of like having a freak out or having like a moment with your child and then doing the repair process afterward. There's so much value in that because then they're going to take that to their lives. And then that's the baseline you're creating for him, that's the baseline that you're creating for their inner voice. Like I can be frustrated or overwhelmed or upset. And, sometimes I'm not going to cope with it in the best way because not everyone, literally no one's going to cope with everything amazingly perfect 100% of the time, every time something happens. It's just not realistic, especially in this world we live in, like everyone's triggered all the time for a reason. Okay. Systemic oppression doesn't shy away from the majority of people, right? We all feel it in some way. Obviously more than others in some cases. Anyway, that's a different conversation. But I think if we give our kids the experience of how to use real life tools like taking deep breaths and removing yourself from the situation really quick so you guys can have some space to kind of like just be with yourself and then come back together. It shows that even in hard times when I'm frustrated by you or I'm just feeling insecure and like projecting frustration about that onto you, we can take a minute and then we can come back and everything's fine. This is still a secure place for you. This is still a stable, safe place for you. There's so much value in that. And the fact that we're parenting this way with our sons, that's going to reverberate into society in really gorgeous ways.
Absolutely. And I think too, something that's important is for any new parents out there or single parents, especially hearing this, it takes time. I feel like for me, being a single parent from the start, like a single parent with a newborn is really just the craziest thing that I feel like someone can go through. Like the PTSD that I have from being a single parent with a newborn. I also think that, a lot of us deal with like perfectionism and anxiety. And so like I fully expected to be like good from the go. Like, okay, I'm going to have my son, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to have all these skills right away. And it's like you get thrown in this crazy scenario where you're not sleeping, you have like a screaming infant with you, and you're just also scared because you're responsible for this new life. And it really is, I mean, to say it's insane is an understatement.
I completely 5,000% agree. I think being a single parent with a newborn is the most gruesome experience of life you can have. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. It's gruesome. It's ugly. It's messy. It's beautiful. But Jesus Christ, that shit was like explosive in some really interesting ways. And I'm not just blowouts. You know what I mean? Like that. The way I always described it is like birth is like the launch. You launch this rocket into space. And then you detach from whatever, they do the detachment thing. Like, okay, that fuel thing is empty and whatever. You start shedding all this crap. And then out comes this little astronaut that's just tethered to you. And you have to like hold on to this little satellite of a person as you like slowly drift back down to Earth. And you
I love
both
that analogy.
Die when there's so many circumstances working against you, like PPD, PPA. Postpartum rage was something that I have experienced so much of, and like, I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't even know. Everyone knows postpartum depression. PPD is like, yeah, that exists. Okay, some people don't.
Yeah, and I feel like that would be a super helpful thing to speak on because I had a lot of postpartum anxiety, which is another thing that I feel like a lot of people don't talk about. But I think I've seen some of your posts on postpartum rage. So, what was your experience like figuring out that that's a thing?
I was having like these outbursts, these like rageful episodes where I would just like start like screaming because I was just so overwhelmed. I I'll kind of digress and backtrack a little bit. I definitely had postpartum depression. I recognized it really early on. I don't know a mom that doesn't have postpartum anxiety, and that's
Yeah,
something that should get talked about way more because literally you are checking on your child to see if they're breathing every 5 minutes, and that's not an exaggeration. So I was having these outbursts, and my partner at the time, so I was dating somebody right before I gave birth, but it was long distance. They were living in California. So I was still going through all of this shit alone. I had someone to talk about it to, but like they weren't really able to be around that much. So I'll just say that. I had some emotional support from a distance. So my partner was just like, yo, like this is not normal behavior. And I'm just like, my life is not normal. And keep in mind, when I was going through my postpartum period, COVID had hit about 4 months into Show's life. Minneapolis started, the uprising started.
yeah, you were right at the center of all of it.
I was right there watching my city burn, watching the world suddenly go into a pandemic,
Just baby in the middle of an apocalypse.
just like so much to handle while also being a single parent with a newborn, while also being a queer person, while also trying to figure out my new identity, not just like gender identity, but like my identity as a person. You don't recognize yourself afterward because your brand fucking new. That's the part that I think people also don't realize is like your identity just comes like apart and you have to figure out how to put yourself back together. So all of that stress, all of that, and my just where I was at in my mental health journey and like the skills that I had in my toolbox to be able to cope with all of that, they just weren't as well developed as I had hoped they would be by the time this all came around. And that's after being in therapy for I think at least a year, maybe a year and a half. But it would all just become so much, and it was scary and intense. So when my partner told me that postpartum rage was like an actual thing, I was really taken aback, but I instantly felt so much less alone. And it was like, even just knowing that that's a thing has so much power in like helping me cope with the fact that I'm like, all this anger is just like flowing out of me in such a loud and like really scary way. It feels out of control. Like, and you don't want to be screaming at the wall because the nail won't go in it because you want to hang the picture. You don't want to be screaming at the blinds. Like, it's just like crazy shit. I don't want to be freaking out over which pair of scissors you're using to cut whatever the fuck you need to cut. It was crazy shit, right?
Absolutely.
So I started doing research on it and I thought about maybe going to support groups, but I kind of went back to my tried and true tool connection and processing, Instagram. And I started posting about postpartum rage. And I was like, this is what I've learned. This is what I've experienced. I guarantee that there's at least a few other people that have experienced this. Literally every mom I know, every single mom I know, every birthing person I know was just like, this is a thing. I go through this.
So personally, I have always been a really chilled person or whatever. And I never felt rage like I did in the first 6 months of my son's life. Like you're saying, over the littlest things. It's so yeah, literally.
It makes you feel so out of control. And I hate using this term because it does suck, but it makes you feel crazy. It makes you feel like you've lost it. And I will say that I feel that I did have undiagnosed, like an undiagnosed form of psychosis because my birth was traumatic and like being that sleepless, they compare it to
Mhm.
like wartime torture. They use sleep tactics, like sleep deprivation tactics to torture people in today's modern world. And that's what we're just going through because there's such a lack of support for mothers in general. And if you're doing it alone, yeah, right. And of course, we all talk about it takes a village, and we have our village, but they have jobs, they have
Mhm.
lives. A lot of them don't follow through with the things they said they were going to help you out with, or they do it once and they feel good about themselves and like, thank you for that one time, but you never see them again. Or It's like they did it 3 times. And it's like I have a constant need of like hourly attendance and I am not getting it. So
Yeah,
I think that that's a huge, huge deficit in our society when it comes to familial support. How are we supporting parents in a real way? Not just with paid maternity leave. I mean, physical support. Like, I think we should be state funding like postpartum doulas and, in home nurses or in home assistants. Why are we leaving people who just pushed something out of their body or had something cut out of their body or just brought this new little sweet creature home from whatever situation you get your child in? Why are we not offering better support to those who really need it?
absolutely. And like you were talking about, it takes a village. We don't live in a society anymore where we're connected like a village. We're all so disconnected. Even like I remember, so I grew up in like the suburbs of Los Angeles, and like I had neighbors that I felt like I could go to, but like that's not a thing anymore. We don't know our neighbors, especially living in like a big city. I live in like a bungalow now, and I don't even know my neighbors that well at all. So it's not like I can just go to the neighbor's house and be like, "Hey, can you watch my kid for a second?" Or even simple like when you have a newborn, I think a lot of people have this misconception. And if you're listening and you know a single parent, like offer to do their dishes, like offer to like
Some
come
for
over
them.
and like
Don't
yeah,
make
just
them
do
feel.
something. Right. Like everyone offers to come watch and like help with the baby, but like postpartum anxiety, I was like, I don't want anyone to touch my baby. Like
My
I
God.
want to be the one holding my baby. Like
Take care of
it's
me. Take care of
yes, honestly.
the birthing parent, and then if there's a support parent that also needs help or a support person, like take care of them second. Baby is up to the main character caretaker. There's always a main caretaker. Sorry. Hello.
Yeah. No, no, I totally agree.
Yeah, if you're listening and you know any parents in your lives, like please go buy them diapers, go buy them wipes, bring
Yes.
them a grocery gift card, do their grocery shopping for them, go pick their stuff up, whatever. Do them favors because any little bit will mean so much to them. It will make a huge difference. It is so hard because we don't live in a communal structure anymore. I think our generation, like millennials or young millennials, older Gen Zs, millennials, I think we saw kind of the bitter end of that kind of communal connection. And I
Yeah.
think now we're in such a divide that people don't trust each other as much or as easily anymore. And I think that just speaks to like how many deep wounds there are that we have to deal with on a societal level. But, you know, in that there's creating an even bigger deficit where there already was one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean we were right on the cusp of so much with like technology. Like we were the last generation, I feel like, to see what it was to go out and not have everyone be taking pictures and be on your phone.
Just to like experience.
Yeah, just to like
Yeah.
be alive. Um
TikTok where it was just like this older guy reenacting what it was like to be a kid. And he got on his bike, rode to his friend's house, walked into his friend's home, said, "Hi, Mrs. Whoever," and then went to his friend's room and was like, "Let's go." And they were like, "What are we doing?" "I don't know." "Okay." And that was it. And that's so true. That's like literally what we did. And you just, even the concept of that is just like, I would never do that. I would never want my child to do that. But it's like, why? Why don't we want that again? You know? Anyway, sorry, getting a little off topic.
no, no, you're fine. I as we're doing this, I just handed my child a tub of Vaseline to rub all over his face. So, anything.
Some good like sensory stimulation,
Right? That's
self-care. We're learning
isn't
self.
that just yeah, single parenthood at its finest. I'm just like, you got it. Uh, no, but definitely, I something else I wanted to touch on. So your story is unique and important in the sense that you are parenting as a non-binary person. So I wanted to hear your thoughts because you still identify with the title mom, correct? Okay, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on how your experience has been with that and coming to that. Um, I guess like coming out with that, coming out with your story.
So I didn't fully realize or like ever question. I had been kind of questioning for a while, but I just like didn't pay it much mind because I'm really femme and I feel very femme. Um, and then I saw someone who kind of looks like me. I was like, well, I'm not just a parent. Like, yes, I'm a parent. I I'm a mother. I'm a creator, a life giver, and that's what's good for me. Like some people who are non-binary and have given birth don't feel that way, and that's fine. But for me, I've always felt like the term mother, mom, mommy fits who I am. And I do this from the perspective that I believe motherhood is not reserved for the cisgendered and heteronormative of this world. I think you can be a mother in many different capacities. I think motherhood is an open call to those who feel the call. You know what I mean? It's there's just like Kirsten from Planned Parenthood, Nurse Kirsten told me there are many ways to be a parent, there's many ways to be a mother. So it's something I like to speak on Mother's Day to remind people like there's so many different ways to be a mother, and that's not just to living children or to children in general. You can be a mother in so many different ways. You can be. I just feel like being a mother is inherently creative. You can be a mother to art. You can be a mother to the earth. You can be a mother, like in any way that you think you can apply it, it's possible. So it's a lot more of a fluid term to me than I think most of us or most of society would want it to be portrayed as, because it's kind of taken it hostage within the binary and within, kind of commodifying like, oh, don't you want to be happy and become a mother and use your body for the only thing the patriarchy thinks it's good for? Don't you want that? And it's like, not for that reason, but so I just think that there's so much power and wisdom in that define feminine, and it is not reserved for cis hetero identities, because it's where we all come from. We come from a mother of sorts, and I think it's a lot more ambiguous than more people. Well, then I think it's
Absolutely.
been portrayed as or marketed as, you know.
Yeah, no. And I think that as a whole, society needs to do less gatekeeping on titles. And if people just like, it's a little bit like if you, like, who are we to say who each other is? The human experience is so complicated and so unique. And it's like, if you, if you identify with it, just like let people identify. Um, yeah, I think everyone comes to, so I know you said you always wanted to be a mother. I had a very opposite experience. Yeah, I never really wanted to be or thought about being a parent. And so, like, coming to terms with the title mother, it still feels weird sometimes. And I think that there was that, what was it, like Grimes posted that her baby doesn't call her mom, they call her by her name or whatever. And I mean, like, go for it, like, I love that. Like, yeah.
Again, many different ways to be a parent, many different ways to be a mother. It's choose your own adventure. We don't have to like abide by these societal norms. We don't have to abide by, the rules that have been projected onto us for our whole lives. It's your life. It's your creation. It's your baby. You get to do it. So,
Right. And it's also like we know it's like projected onto us to keep us in that one role, like you were saying, like the patriarchy, like it's the one thing we're good for or whatever traditionally. And I think that that still comes up for a lot of birthing people, in the sense that like it's so easy to lose other parts of your identity when you become a parent, because it is so all consuming and it is so demanding. And I know that that can come into play with dating. Like, I feel like, at least personally, being a single parent, like, dating is so, so hard. And it can feel so meaningless at times, especially with like a newborn. You're like, okay, am I really going to spend this hour going on a date that could potentially be terrible? And then, and you also, so you said you were dating someone when you were pregnant though, and then that ended.
that ended. Um,
What was it like going through a breakup as a single parent?
well, there comes a point where you just realize like you're the one in the thick of parenting and in the reality, especially like given the context of our relationship, it was long distance. And
Mhm.
they didn't have a ton of money. I didn't have a ton of money. So it was just like our hopes were that I would move out to California, but my son has a really solid relationship with his father, and that's really important to me. And I wasn't about to be the person that broke that up just because I wanted to go see if this relationship worked. So I would suggest, like, what if you came here? And then it was sort of this debate of, like, but my career is out here. And I'm like, okay, but like the family you want is out here. And it just started to kind of devolve over time. And, there was other things going on. But I just got to this point where I realized, like, if this is really the situation you wanted to be in, if you really wanted to commit yourself to a family that you've been, building a relationship with, you would come be here. And they just were kind of like had blinders on, and I was like, okay, that's got to end. The fact that I split custody with my son's father was helpful so that I had time to process and grieve, but it was hard. It was really hard because you have like this family structure, and it kind of feels like it's the bookend to, you know, having a child while single, and then there's someone there that's interested. It's just like, holy shit, I struck gold. But then you realize it's not going to work, like, and that's okay. But you have to grieve a lot. You have a lot to grieve. So yeah, it was hard, but I don't regret it, and I'm glad I made that decision. And yeah, it was like a huge chance to grow. It made me realize the kind of parent I want to be. Yeah, it was hard, but it was valuable. And my experience with the person, like when we were together, was still really valuable. And it taught me a lot. I learned so much about myself. I mean, I learned how to grapple with like these deeper, darker parts of my own mental health. The postpartum rage was a huge part of that. So, in essence, overall, I think it was positive, albeit
Yeah.
frustrating because I was alone for most of a relationship that lasted about a year. So,
Yeah.
it was
I mean, being long distance, yeah, that would be difficult, especially in a situation as isolating as being a single parent. I think it can be hard for someone to understand what you're going through already, but especially if they're not physically there, if they're somewhere else across the country.
yeah, and they would
Um,
they would come, but then it was like, or we would go out there and I would have to like reteach them all the routines because they forgot and they changed so quickly because baby's growing so fast. So I was constantly have to do this extra labor of like, okay, this is so I'm still like single parenting half the time because my partner was like kind of clueless and to no fault of their own other than just not being around. And then to have to get used to being taken care of half of that time and attended to, and then for that to just suddenly be gone was like that was traumatizing in of itself because now I'm back to being alone and I have to readjust all of this again. And so does my child. So it was just the there's an inconsistency in that. And though it was manageable, clearly, it was
I think too, though, like a lot of single parents, and I don't know if you feel this, but I definitely feel like there's a pressure to like only introduce a relationship that is going to work. I know it's different because you were pregnant when you were dating, but there's an added pressure of like, okay, I can't be doing this back and forth when I have my kid. Like I feel like before like dating just as an individual, just as a single person, not a parent, it's like, okay, I can do this back and forth. I can have an on-off relationship, whatever. But like, what parent wants to bring that to their kid?
exactly
And so,
anything that negatively affects you affects your child. And you don't want people
yeah,
out of their life because we just all know that that's not healthy. That probably happened to some of us. Definitely happened to me growing up. And it's hard to like make a connection and then have it ripped away, and then you just never see that person or hear about them again. It's confusing to a child, and you want to minimize as much damage or harm, because our version of helicopter parent is I'm afraid of traumatizing my child. So
Yes.
that's like our generation's like parenting kryptonite, I guess.
Oh my God, for sure. And it's such a controversial topic too, like when you should introduce your partner to your children. Like I know a lot of people say like 6 months, but it's like how are you supposed to know that you're gonna like form a relationship with someone if you don't see them interact with your kid and know how they are with kids? And also like 6 months doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna be a lasting relationship. Like,
I actually have the best scenario about dating that I just went through that touches on all of this.
oh my God, yes, please share.
So after that last breakup, I, really was just kind of saying to myself, kind of casually dating, no one meets my son, because I'm not sure like if anything's going to turn out. And I'm also just really focused on working on myself. But I finally meet somebody who I really like, and we totally fall in love. And we start talking about like introduction of kids. This person had two kids that are older. They were 13 and 11 or something. And then, or something, like, I don't care. I do care. Like I wasn't like in an invested relationship. But then my son, he's 3 now, and we start talking about it, and I always try to make sure I'm on the same page with my son's father, because like I think that the other parent deserves a little autonomy, or at least communication about it. And we have an agreement like that we trust each other to know when it's a good time, and we'll leave that up to the other. So I think in that there's also like, if you do co-parent, it's really helpful to just have like the trusted support of the co-parent. And if that can't happen, if possible, if that can't happen, then they don't deserve to be involved with with that particular situation. So the fact about younger kids that we can consider in this kind of dynamic is that they're so young that if the connection is lost, it's really not going to affect them that much. You can also kind of mitigate like how you present the relationship. So my partner and I at the time decided like, you're just going to be my new friend, and Sholo is going to meet my new friend, and we're going to hang out sometimes. We're going to do some stuff together sometimes, just like we would with any one of our other friends. And that worked really well for us. It was really sweet. And eventually we started to do like sleepovers, but Sholo and I would sleep in one bed, and then my partner would sleep in a separate room. And so we kind of were able to like manage it so that it wasn't just like, look at mom making out with this person in the kitchen all of a sudden. What you doing? So I think it comes down to how you manage it, especially with younger kids who don't quite understand. Now with his kids that were older, the stakes are a little higher. They had gone through a divorce during the pandemic. They had gone through a ton of stuff, and their mental health was like super high concern. It's just going to affect them differently. So we decided to pause. I never did meet them because we decided to break up. But in a way, I mean, it's strange because there's like a grief there, I'm sure, on either side of it, where my ex-partner is having to grieve like letting go of my son, and I'm grieving never having met these kids that I've heard so much about, that I think are marvelous people. I've bought gifts for them before, and like obviously had their dad bring them to them. But yeah, it's just, you think you're going to develop these relationships, and then you realize in the end, like, it's not going to happen. And so I think in some ways it's unavoidable, but you can do it in a healthy way, and you can talk about it too. I talk about it with Sholo, like I told them that my partner and I, we weren't going to be friends anymore, basically, kind of like breaking it down to the 3-year-old toddler terms that he could understand, right. And letting him see me feel sad about that. It's hard to keep it together when you're moving through a breakup while you're trying to parent.
That's so powerful though.
Yeah, I was like visibly sad, and he understands what sad is, and he's like, "You're crying?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm crying really sad." And he'll ask why, and I'm like, "Well, so-and-so doesn't want to be my friend anymore. And I think we're not going to be friends, and just sort of breaking that down and talking about, it makes me sad because I miss this person, I really care about this person. And it's sad when you have to let go of people. So kind of giving them understanding of what I'm going through in a way that they can digest and that's appropriate, so that they can kind of model that when the time comes, or if they need to with this particular situation.
Yeah. I mean, that's something though, with any situation, you lose certain things and you gain certain things. Like there's really hard parts about being a single parent, obviously, but there's some bonuses. And I think one of the added benefits that you get that you don't get necessarily if you're not a single parent is you do get to teach your child in real time about dating, like through your experiences. Like they're gonna watch you date, they're gonna see your experiences, they're gonna watch you potentially break up. And so that's like a unique opportunity that we have as single parents. Like show got to see you experience a breakup and handle that and heal from that. And I think that that's really powerful in itself.
Yeah, life after love, man. It's a skill that I wish I wasn't so good
at. I know, huh? Oh my God, I feel you.
To be able to like demonstrate that to my son, if he should ever need it, which he will, because he's not going to go through a breakup in their life. It is like fortunate that he gets to see that, see me be human. And
we've only got a couple more minutes left. You've already kind of touched on this about co-parenting, and I know that when we first met, one of the things that we talked about was how hard it is to co-parent with an ex. And I know that we've both been through the whole like couples counseling or co-parenting counseling, and I'm curious. It seems like you have a better grip on it now. And so I'm like, what would be your advice to other single parents out there who might be co-parenting with a difficult ex or an ex who they have a difficult time communicating with?
Yeah, I think it's funny because we actually got fired by our therapist.
I know. I remember you telling me that. I was like, oh my God. Like, I get
we
it.
didn't know how to handle our case. It was out of her wheelhouse. My son's father and we never had like an established relationship. It was really just like a casual thing, which adds a whole other layer of contention to our dynamic. And without saying too much, he does, or at least has, harbored a lot of resentment towards me. There's some resentment that he had a hard time dealing with about the fact that I chose to follow through with the pregnancy. And that still plays out sometimes. And we tried to do the whole therapy thing. That didn't work out because our therapist didn't know what to do with us. It was like totally not something she was prepared to treat. And also like only one person is participating in like a productive way. What's the point of going? It was pretty much just like 1 hour every week, way too early on a Friday morning. Sophia gets demonized for being pregnant, and it was horrible. So
oh no.
And I've tried so many times like over the years to try to level with him and be like, well, why don't we try to like do some things that can like bond us as a family but still respects boundaries and all of that. And sometimes it's worked out well and sometimes it hasn't. It's always an ongoing thing, but for the most part I've come to the conclusion that if they don't want to see you and they don't want to choose kindness when it comes to interacting with you, and they don't want to validate your experience and, be a decent person, then that's not your job. So
boundaries just become 10 times more important when you have a kid.
Yeah. And you also have to kind of call yourself and catch yourself on the shit that you bring to the table too. Like if you participate in a dynamic, like if you've been caught up in that like text storm dynamic where you're just angry texting each other, that's not conducive to a co-parenting relationship. And I've totally gotten caught up in that. And so I guess I got to a point where anytime that happened, which became less over time. But anytime it happened, I was just like, I don't like being the person that comes out ripping him a new one every time he just is an idiot. So,
Yeah. Oh my
like,
gosh. Yeah.
okay, you're an idiot. Well, guess what? Whatever. It wasn't
That like
productive,
nagging woman trope.
literally, or you're being crazy. Oh my God. So I pretty much just decided, like, I'm going to keep it to need to know information. I'm not going to engage in any little, like, he sets for me. You know, like, the fact that the lawyer doesn't help because he wants to argue literally everything, even if it's pointless. So it takes a lot for me to have to remember, like, I don't have to engage with that. I can just be like, you have to develop a skill about how to be flat, informational, and just kind of cut yourself off a little bit.
Yes.
Which is
I
what
love
I had
that.
to do to maintain a healthy relationship with him, you know? And
Yeah.
it's not that I don't care, and it's not that I don't seek like emotional support and connection to my co-parent. Like, of course I want that, but it's not plausible because they can't participate in the dynamic in a like positive way, then
No, I mean, I received similar advice, and I totally agree because I think that people have this misconception of co-parenting with an ex who has been abusive or is narcissistic or has tendencies, whatever, that like that they're always that way. But like they're capable. Like you can co-parent with a toxic ex, and at times they can be cooperative or seemingly really involved and present and kind. And it's easy for people to confuse that with like, oh, okay, like so it should be fine. Like you should be able to like let your guard down. You should be able to do all that. But I think it's so important in parallel parenting and co-parenting to be consistent with your own boundaries so that no matter what your co-parent is doing on their end, you know that you've got your shit backed up on your end, you know? And like you said, you know, it can be good, they can be involved and whatever, but you got to be firm in your boundaries as well.
but back to like boundarying, you know, having boundaries with your co-parent, you can still have like a really healthy and good relationship even at an arm's length. You know, you can still do that at an arm's length. And that's something I've had to really learn. Like, I don't have to intertwine or enmesh myself with this person's life to still give our son a beautiful life. You know, he's still capable of being an amazing dad, you know, and there's a few things we disagree on with parenting. He does kind of tend towards like more tough parenting styles, and I am not into that. I'm into like emotional attunement and like yeah, just gentle parenting and just staying present and like helping my son learn about himself so that he knows how to cope with the world.
No, I mean, I think the arm's length thing is so important. You know, you can still have an involved relationship at arm's length, and
Right.
you know, I think again, same as like having a newborn and being a single parent, it just takes time. You know, it's new for everyone. Everyone's adjusting. For any single parents out there co-parenting, just my advice would be like give yourself some grace and some time because it eventually all works out one way or another. You know, might take longer for others, but it just takes time. Speaking of time, we could talk for hours, but I feel like we are at time. So I wanted to give you a chance to go ahead and tell people where they can find you.
Yes. So I have my personal Instagram page is at Mother Sparkle with no vowels. So it's MTHSPRKL. And then you can find my healing business, The Feel, at the.feel, PHEAL. And that's also on Instagram. If you're a single parent and you just need to like talk about some shit, please hit me up. I love hearing from people. I love talking to single parents. I love, you know, sometimes the best help is just being able to bounce ideas off of someone or whatever. So reach out, let me know. I I also do like Reiki distance healing. So if you're in need of some healing, really,
Yeah, and speaking from personal experience, you were super helpful to me when I was pregnant and when I had a newborn. So I 10 out of 10 recommend reaching out to her.
thank you so much. Yes, I appreciate that so much. It makes me really happy to hear that. Because it helps heal me, you know? Healing is like the center of my life.
Yeah.
And, I feel healed when I help others do the same for themselves. So, yes.
I hope that episode was helpful. Hey, listen, if you want to share your singlehood journey, if you've gone somewhere and come back, if you have revelations and wisdom, please share your story. It's going to help other people. Nothing makes us feel more connected than hearing other people's stories. So just send me the audio of your story, and you could just record it directly from your phone and email it to theangrytherapist@gmail.com. Also, if you want our Single on Purpose newsletter, go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life. You will get tools and articles and other people's stories, and also Zoom links to private gathers. So if you want to join our community, go to singleonpurpose.life. Thank you for listening. Be well. We hope you tell a friend. Hey, before you go, I want to invite you to the Single on Purpose private community online. It's off of social media, no ads, no algorithms. We got forums, we got live groups, we got webinars, and we have social hangs. We also have offline in-person hangs happening soon. So check us out. Go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life, and I will see you inside.